and welcome to the Sustainable Materials Management webinar series, a joint effort between the National Recycling Coalition and the Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center. My name is Scott Marks, and I'm a program manager for the Recycling Market Center, and I will serve as the moderator today. Before we get started with the presentation, we would like to extend a special thanks to Bob Hollis of the Mobius Network for providing the webinar management software for this series. The focus of today's webinar is on thermostat recycling. Our presenter is Danielle Myers, who I will introduce in a moment. Following the presentation, we will conduct a question and answer session. If you have a question or comment, please use the GoToWebinar dialog box located in the control panel on your screen. You may also use the dialog box to request assistance if you are experiencing technical difficulties during the webinar. Please note that an edited version of this webinar will be made available for viewing via YouTube on the National Recycling Coalition and Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center's websites. The presentation slides can also be downloaded now using the handout feature on your webinar control panel. And now I would like to introduce our presenter. In December 2016, Danielle joined Thermostat Recycling Corporation and currently holds the role of Operations and Compliance Manager. She is responsible for maintaining regulatory compliance and manages the program's processing facility. Previously, Danielle worked for the Pennsylvania-based energy engineering firm Our World Energy Solutions as the Sustainability Manager, where she assisted with procuring rebates for utility customers and spearheaded the company's B Corp certification, ensuring they met rigorous social and environmental performance, accountability, and transparency standards. A graduate of St. Joseph's University, Danielle holds a Bachelor of Science in Leadership, Ethics, and Organizational Sustainability from the Haub School of Business. Danielle, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for joining the webinar. And okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about who Thermostat Recycling Corporation is, kind of what we do here as a program, and then we'll go with what regulations control our program, why we run today, and maybe what we see as our future and where this program is going. So Thermostat Recycling Corporation, also known as TRC, is an industry-funded nonprofit. We are funded by 31 thermostat manufacturers, and our mission is to promote and facilitate the proper management of Mercury thermostats that are no longer in use today. So they've been removed from the wall, and we want to make sure that they don't hit the waste stream. Our budget this year is $3.5 million. It's gone up in recent years due to regulations in certain states. But if you wanted to compare our program to another that you may be familiar with, we could compare it kind of to the end-of-life vehicle solutions program. And the reason we're similar is we both deal with a product that contained mercury inside, and it's a product that's actually no longer available. So it's no longer sold. They no longer make these products. And the ELVS program, the Vehicle Solutions Program, has seen quite a decline because the last mercury switch in automakers was in 2002, and very similar mercury thermostats were stopped in, last one was sold in 2007. So this is just a list of our current members at TRC. And we are completely funded by these members. And so these are either thermostat manufacturers who once produced mercury thermostats, or maybe in today's world, produce a product that would replace the mercury thermostat. So not all of these members here on the screen created a mercury thermostat. So you'll see Nest and Ecobee, which are popular products today for new smart thermostats. And although they never made a mercury thermostat, they help fund our program to take back the old mercury thermostats. And the way our program works is typically a contractor goes in and removes a mercury thermostat from a wall in a home to update it or replace it with a newer version. it's not very often that an individual homeowner is changing out their own thermostat, although that does happen and the DIY network is growing. We typically still see most of our returns come back with a contractor recycling these Mercury thermostats. So once they remove it from the wall, they actually take it with them, hopefully, and then they return it at the HVAC wholesaler where they purchase new thermostats. We have plenty of collection locations. The majority of our drop-off locations are HVAC wholesalers where you would see this green recycling bin, but we are also in retailers and household hazardous waste facilities and different waste drop-off locations. This green bin is provided free to these locations, and it comes with a prepaid FedEx shipping label. So the green bin can be sent with FedEx Ground, and it comes with everything to collect and fill it. As long as there is one thermostat or more in the bin, it needs to be shipped once a year to comply with regulations, and that location just returns the bin back to us in our processing center, which is in Port Washington, Wisconsin. And then there at the processing center, they recycle these thermostats properly, and that exact same bin is resupplied with the material that the location needs in a new shipping label and sent back to them. So it's just a continued process. They send it in to return, we recycle the thermostats and send it right back to them. So as long as our program's been around, we've had that picture of the green recycling bin. That's been our go-to container to recycle in. It holds about 100 T87 round thermostats, which is the most popular Mercury thermostat out there. And you will see these at the wholesalers' retail locations like we mentioned before. We also provide in the picture, you can see it's sitting kind of on a display, a cardboard display we have, which is within the past few years, a recent addition to kind of elevate the bin and maybe make customers aware of the program that didn't know we existed. So it picks the bin up off the ground, kind of makes it more easily accessible, and markets what it actually is sitting there for. When you go into these locations, typically at an HVAC wholesaler, that's just sitting on the floor somewhere, and all these contractors come in, just drop their thermostats in the bin. They know how the program works. So that's why that display is there to kind of help set it apart. Within the past 2 years, though, we added a new container offering. So we have this smaller pail that holds about 6 thermostats, so a significantly less amount of thermostats. The reason we chose this new product offering is we've seen diminishing returns. So some barriers when we go to place these collection bins have been that they take up too much space, or we would never fill this bin, like we don't need something that big. So these pills provide a nice option for that. They take up a whole lot less space, and if you have smaller Mercury thermostat collections, these are perfect. It actually works just like the bin does, so it comes with the prepaid shipping label and everything you need to collect inside. But it really works for these other locations that just don't see nearly as many thermostats. The other program that we kind of started with this small pail offering is collection locations that we've had for years and years are seeing less returns. So if we get a green bin returned from a wholesaler or a retail location and it has 6 or less Mercury thermostats in it, we automatically send them a small pail instead of returning their bin. That way they could use this pail going forward. They have the option not to. If they would prefer to keep the green bin, that's fine, but we're trying to just help out locations and provide a smaller container for their numbers, and that would hopefully get us a greater number of return times. So that bin that may sit there for 1.5 years without getting sent in, this pail may get sent 3 times in the time that that bin would. So that kind of helps get our collections more frequently as well. In case I'm talking about Mercury thermostats and you're actually not aware of what that is, here's a few pictures. So on the bottom left, you can see a very popular round, what we call the T87 thermostat. But they also came in large rectangles, and it's just a non-programmable Mercury thermostat. And we also get calls quite frequently saying, well, I don't know if my thermostat has mercury in it. And there are round thermostats out there that actually don't even have mercury, even though they look like they might. So we have this document that we can provide, and the cover of a thermostat pretty easily just pops right off, and you'll be able to visibly see if it has that clear, what we call a mercury ampule or a switch inside, and you'll see the silvery mercury substance in it. And then depending on what type of thermostat it is, it can have between 1 and 4 ampules. So there is a decent amount of mercury in that thermostat, so we just want to make sure that we get all of them that we should be. So to date, we've actually collected over 2.4 million thermostats throughout the 48 contiguous states, which is equivalent to about 11 tons of mercury that we've diverted from the waste stream. And we have 48 state regulations that mandate our take-back program, but we actually run our program and operate in all of the states. So this says we've had over 9,400 recycling bins that we've sent out there. And it shows the split between mandatory, which would be a state that mandates our take-back program, or a non-mandatory program where we provide the bin and either there's no regulations around mercury thermostats or they don't mandate that we would have to take them back. So even though the regulations aren't everywhere, we actually offer this option for all the states. To kind of give you a visualization of how many recycling bins that is, it's equivalent to 933 stories of a building, or building 9 trade centers. So we're pretty proud of that number. It's quite a few bins that are out there for us. This is just a timeline of TRC and our program. So we were actually voluntarily funded by 3 manufacturers in 1998. So Honeywell, Wright Rogers, and General Electric started this program, and we were based in Arlington, Virginia. And then between 2004 and 2007, the production of mercury thermostats completely drops off, and the last produced mercury thermostat was in 2007. But in 2006, we had our first EPR bill that was passed in the state of Maine. So that was our first one. And once that one passed, we actually had 13 more. So today we have 14 states that have an extended producer responsibility law for us. And in Minnesota, which is where we originally started taking back these thermostats in the 90s, they had regulations around mercury product management. So it's been around for quite a while. In 2010, our collections exceeded 200,000 units, which was great. But in 2014, we hit our peak. So we had a little over 203,000 units that we collected that year. And now we've seen, a downward trend. But that's kind of to be expected because they're not made any more of these products. And while we're not adding them to the product stream anymore, eventually one day, hopefully we'll have collected the last one out there. And let's see, so pretty recently, the very end of 2016, beginning of 2017, we moved our headquarters from Alexandria, Virginia, up to Fort Washington, Pennsylvania, which is actually right above Philadelphia. And this year, we are proud to say that we are celebrating our 20th year anniversary. So that brings us into the present day for the program. We have these regulations in these states. There are actually 2 federal laws that have mandates about mercury. So we have RCRA, which helps us ship those bins back, keeping them under a pound of mercury. So that law's a great help so we can ship it with FedEx. And then there was the MEBO law passed. And then, as I've mentioned, we have 14 states that have these manufacturer obligations to fund this take-back program that we run. An additional 15 states have just a disposal ban. So it doesn't say how you have to dispose it, you just can't throw it in the waste stream. And then we still run in the additional 34 states this program to help with Mercury Thermostat. So this chart, if you can view it, it might be a little hard to see, but it shows our 14 states that have our take-back program that's mandated. Each law is a little different and names different people that are responsible for this recycling or who it could come back on. But in all of these states, we run this program because we have to. So we have state annual reports that we submit that could be viewed on our website and different regulations around each of these laws. This year we have really focused on a utility industry. So in the past, I talked about how most of our bins are located with HVAC wholesalers or retailers. Because the contractor removes this Mercury thermostat, he's typically the one recycling it. But we feel if there's any sector out there we haven't tapped that may really bring in a great number of thermostats for us, it would be the utility industry. So we have the growing energy efficiency programs, and if you're updating your heating, chances are maybe you have an old boiler, and so these contractors, through these efficiency programs, may be updating your thermostat to go along with your new heating. So it's a difficult sector to kind of get into. We've tried to come from all angles. We've recently had quite a success with a company called ECA. They're in Philadelphia, and they have a low-income heating program that they get funding for. So we're working very closely with them, and we hope that once we have it all run out and we're doing it well, that we can roll this out with other similar organizations that receive the funding from either weatherization grants or low-income housing grants, those types of things. Another sector that we are in, but not as well as we'd like to be, is household hazardous waste facilities. So I'd mentioned that these DIY homeowners may possibly be replacing a Mercury thermostat, and we want to give them an option that they're more convenient for instead of going back to a wholesaler. So we'd like to be at the local community drop-off locations and things like that. And we think it's a win-win, right? So we provide this container free, we recycle it for free, so it's really just an additional option that you can offer residents. So that's another sector we're working on. And then we are very engaged with the waste to energy facility. We partner with Covanta and Wheelabrator in certain states, and we do collection days with them and different promotions that help bring Mercury thermostats in and kind of divert them before they hit their, their dump or their solid waste collection. The last thing we're really focusing on in 2018 is our business processes. So we're a pretty lean organization. It's actually only myself and our executive director that are direct employees of TRC. So it really helps when we update our software and can automate some processes to help the two of us run this program. And one of the most exciting things that has just rolled out this year is we are offering our collections as real-time data on our website. So here you can see a screenshot of what this begins to look like. But we provide collection location, addresses, and contacts, and we can give historical data for a certain state since the beginning of the program, or we can do, as you can see here, aggregated by state during the year. We can compare state to state. And so this is constantly updating. It's pulling directly from our database that's being entered all day long. One thing is, if you were to go run a report that you wanted for like the end of month or a quarter, we would recommend that you would wait until approximately mid-month of the following to run, just to make sure that all the bins that have been returned have been able to go through the process and entered into our database. So we got this idea to pull this real-time data from the ELVS program, which we mentioned before. So it shows very similar data as to that program for the vehicle switches. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about, so present day would be our collections, and the data that we provide now on our website, we also provide in state annual reports for our 14 mandated states. And so the collections we're going to look at here are for end of year of 2017. So as you can see, over time our collections really grew, and then we talked about how our peak hit in 2014, and we hit over 203,000 that year. But since then we have been on the decline. A much slower decline than our incline, but a decline nonetheless, which we expected just because we're not producing these anymore, they're not out there, so really we just have to collect what was already out there. Our program is very similar to other diminishing returns, so we partner recycling with Veolia Environmental Solutions, and they have their own Recycle Pack program that if somebody wanted to recycle a Mercury thermostat, they may come across that program as well. And all of these thermostat programs are seeing declines. So this chart shows the average thermostats that are returned inside of one of our green recycling bins. So back in the day, I said that green recycling bin can hold up to 100, and when Mercury thermostats are very popular or being replaced or updated, those bins were filled to capacity and were returned quite frequently. But as the years have gone on, you can see that our average has dropped almost in half. And so now, even this year to date, I think we're down into the high 30s. So we're only seeing, 43 or maybe about 37 this year so far, average thermostats in the bin. So although that's to be expected because they're just not out there as often, the problem is we're working extra hard to get these thermostats, and we're just not seeing the returns in the bin. So if you're familiar at all with the HVAC world and their wholesalers, you'll notice our top collection locations are all HVAC wholesalers. And this just shows the number of bins that were returned from that company. So Johnson Supply is throughout the United States. They are by far our greatest collection location. And in last year, with all of their branches, they managed to send back 515 bins. But all of these are very good HVAC wholesalers, and they definitely provide our best collections. This chart compares last year's numbers to 2016, so the year before. And the word you'll see converted. So it's the full year, and then it's a converted thermostat number. And what converted means is we collect whole thermostats, or we prefer them to come back whole in that green recycling bin with the cover on and everything. But there are contractors out there who have been replacing Mercury thermostats for years, and we're trying to do the right thing. If they didn't know what it was, and they may have clipped the Mercury switch or ampule out of those thermostats. So they just have, many of these little Mercury tubes that were cut from the thermostats. And so we obviously don't want those to go in the waste stream. We have special regulations that we can work with our locations to accept those from the contractor, and we just have to package them separately and make sure they don't break. But we want to be able to count those too. So in a thermostat, you can have between 1 and 4 of these ampules. And so depending on the state and a brand that was very popular, we come up with an average ampule in those thermostats. And then we can use a calculation and come up with how many thermostats approximately those ampules add up to. So that's what that converted number means. It's a little bit higher than our whole thermostat count. And so you can see that although we looked at that average thermostat in the bin chart before, within 1 year we dropped and we lost 3 more thermostats in a bin. But the problem with that is you can see in 2016, we processed 3,552 green recycling bins that were returned. And then in 2017, we raised that number. So we processed a lot more bins than we had the year previously, but we still didn't collect the number that we had the year before. So where do we see our program going? A term that our executive director has come up with is the Goldilocks zone. So we like to say our best bet for where these mercury thermostats still may be tends to be in a region that is in the cold to very cold climate zone. And the reason for that is homes in those climate zones tend to have boilers. They're in the Midwest. They probably don't have a heat pump. They're more likely to have a boiler, which is a type of equipment that actually works really well, which is great. And old mercury thermostats have a very long warranty as well. That just means that they are more likely to still be in use and still functioning. So that's where we will most likely still see these mercury thermostats come back from. Another thing is that these R.E. Michael and Johnstone Supply, which are HVAC wholesalers, are very popular in the Midwest, and so they still serve as our best collection location. And as long as that state has a disposal ban, contractors want to do the right thing. So there may not be a mandate for our program to run in that state, but they know they shouldn't throw a mercury thermostat in the trash can, so they still know to use our program. And so we feel that in the future, it would make sense to always continue to take back these mercury thermostats because they are still out there and they will be for a while. They're just not nearly as numerous. So we would look to do a voluntary program in all states like we do in the 40 some states that don't have a law that mandates our program. So even some of these state laws have sunsets, so when it runs out, we would still take back mercury thermostats because these manufacturers feel an obligation to do that because they did sell them. But that's where we see our program going. That's why we would really like to be with household hazardous waste facilities as collections, so homeowners and even contractors in the day, if these wholesalers don't continue to take back, you can still go to your local facility to recycle them. The other thing is you'll notice in this picture, this shows a thermostat that has the cover removed, and it shows the mercury ampules. And although there's no way to know how many thermostats are still out there today, there is this date code on most thermostats, and we're hoping that one day we might be able to kind of see where this year is going. So this date code shows the year that it was produced, and we would love to collect closer and closer to 2007 so that we know that we've collected them all. Even the ones that were installed most frequently, hopefully we've taken back. The other reason a volunteer program is in our future, hopefully, is because this graph shows the cost of a recovered thermostat. So we are working so hard to get these bins back, and we're just not seeing the numbers. So our funding is going higher and higher to get less and less returns. As you can see, nationally, we just spend more to get just one thermostat as compared to the year before, and this continues to increase. So at some point, you can only do so much advertising. They're just not there, and so if we weren't mandated to do those things, that's why we see a voluntary program in our future. This graph I just wanted to end on. It shows that mercury emissions have reduced as the years go on, and although mercury thermostats are a sliver of a sliver, because mercury products aren't a very big reason for mercury emissions, we really hope we've done our part and that this shows that we're leading to a successful future. And that's the end of the presentation. So I guess we will take questions.
Thank you, Danielle. Yeah, so if I do have a couple of questions here, if you'd like to ask a question or if one comes to mind as we begin the discussion here, just go ahead to the questions tab on your control panel and go ahead and type it in there. So the first question that I have, Danielle, is what states have the EPR law? And so that was the question, and I guess my comment is does that correspond to the thermostat legislation chart that you had in one of your slides?
It did, yes. I think, here we go. So all 14 states on here have an EPR law passed.
And then some states have some additional requirements in addition to that as well then, correct?
Right. There are like about, I think it's 15 states that have a disposal ban. So they may not mandate our program to run, but they say that you can't throw a Mercury thermostat out into the trash, so you need to do it properly. There are other programs you can use. Our program just happens to be the free program to recycle through.
Okay, great, thanks. And you had mentioned right there at the end the difficulty in getting thermostats that are out there. It's you know, the cost per thermostat recovered has gone up. Do you guys have any idea just how many are out there anymore?
No, we wish we did. It's a great question. There are a lot of ideas about how you could try to find it, and there's just really no good answer. In the past, population or census has been brought up. The problem with that is, you know, we're similar to maybe paint and batteries, and they're in a home, but it's not attributed, so not every person has a thermostat, right? So there may be 5 people in a home. There's just really no good way to kind of even guess at how many are out there. It's been done, but no way has really come up with a good way so far.
Okay, great. I have a couple more questions here. So what data was used to determine the cost per thermostat? Like, are you including legal fees and travel to conferences on other non-recycling costs, or is it strictly the logistics of, you know, exchanging the containers, getting the thermostats to where they're going, and that sort of thing?
No, it does include the advertising. So in certain states, either through a law or just working with the department and trying to get greater collections that they would like to see, we do add in all the work we do. So we do site visits, and we call these locations trying to get them to return bins. So we do add all of those costs in to kind of account for what it actually costs for each thermostat. Otherwise, all states would be the same per thermostat because it's the same shipping cost as like an inbound bin comes in. It's the same cost. We process all Mercury thermostats the same no matter what state. It's just what we actually are required to do per state that really adds to our cost. Okay,
thank you. And on the last slide where you're talking about the reduced mercury emissions, the last year that you're showing there is 2015. Now, is that data coming from EPA, or is there any newer data on whether mercury emissions have gone down substantially since then?
That is the most recent data, correct, from EPA. That's not our data, but that's the most recent that we had found. Yep.
Okay. I did get a question about if the presentation is available to share. And so right below where you typed in your question, you should see a tab that says Handout, and then there's a PDF file of the presentation that Danielle displayed. I do have another question. So do you have any idea what happens to the mercury once it's recycled? For instance, I recognize that it's, you know, it's not been used, and it's been mandated to not be used in new products as legislation has come in over the past couple of decades. Are there any current uses for it? What happens to the mercury once it's reclaimed?
Sure. So we have a contract with Veolia Environmental Solutions. So all Mercury thermostats are shipped to Port Washington for their facility, where they retort the mercury and dispose of the rest of the thermostat properly. And then most of the mercury is actually just stored because there isn't a whole lot of use for it.
Okay. Thank you very much. I see there are, maybe we do have, there are a couple more questions here. Fantastic. So can we please see the cost to collect chart again?
Sure. There you go.
All right, and the questioner just wants to be walked through the cost again.
Okay, so this is showing, so the green bar is showing in 2016 how much we had to spend to get back roughly one thermostat, and then the blue is 2017. So in most states, you see that we're spending more, especially towards the right-hand side of the graph. If you see in California, we did spend less. We have collection targets that we actually don't reach, so we have to pay fines, and that differs from year to year, so that greatly fluctuates the number of thermostats, but we still do a great amount of advertising. So just to collect one thermostat in California, we're spending almost $50 per thermostat to recycle.
Okay.
If there are direct questions, I could take more too.
Sure. The next question is, are there any costs for companies to become part of the program?
There is not. So if you go on our website, there is an order form, and it does say a $25 one-time fee. We waive that for almost everybody nowadays. So if you're an HHW facility or someone that doesn't make a whole lot of money, we provide that free of cost. There are some HVAC wholesalers, when they open new branches, they still pay a $25 one-time fee. But for most new orders, no, we don't charge anything, and then you can continue to use that bin for free as long as you'd like.
Okay, there's a question, how can you tell if it's a Mercury thermostat? If you could scroll back to that one slide that shows the picture.
Yeah. So a cover on a thermostat pops off really easily, at least for most thermostats, and then it's very easy to see those little, it's a glass ampule, there can be between 1 and 4, and you'll see the silvery, liquid substance that's the mercury inside. And if chances are, if you can program your thermostat at all, there is no mercury in it. So mercury couldn't be programmed as a thermostat, so that helps as well.
Yeah, that is good information. Thank you. One last question here. Are fines that are paid in California added to the cost per thermometer thermostat for thermostats sold in California?
So the fines wouldn't be, because that was, we as a program aren't fined actually if we don't hit a target. It was the individual manufacturers. But we do have a program that we work with the state to try to hit collection targets and not get those fines. So there is a much greater advertising budget that we have to do in that state. So all of the additional program requirements. So we have to visit every location in the state, and we call and we email. So all of that adds up. A fine is not rolled into that because we as a program are not fined for not hitting collection goals. It's the actual manufacturers.
Okay, and I guess to extend on perhaps what the questioner was asking, because of the legislation in California, are thermostats more expensive? You can't answer that question.
To buy a new one, I have no idea. To recycle the old ones, yes, it is much more costly compared to other states because of the regulations in that state.
Okay, and looks like we have a couple more requests. Can we see the reduced emission slide again?
Oh, sure.
All right, yeah, so that's 2000 to 2015, and that data is found on the EPA website then, Danielle?
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and
so
lastly,
thermostat, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, so we're a very small sliver of a sliver for mercury emissions. We just like to show that, hopefully we had whatever minor impact that these emissions are going down. Obviously, there are multiple programs that are about mercury and reducing mercury. We just like to show this, that hopefully we're, going in the right direction for the future.
Thank you very much. And one last request, can you put up the slide that has your contact information again?
Sure.
All right. right, so we'll leave that up for a minute, but thanks, Danielle, for the presentation. I know I certainly learned something about it here. So thanks to all the attendees for spending a little bit of time watching, and thanks for the power not going out here. But again, this webinar, like all of the webinars in this series, has been recorded and will be available via YouTube on both the National Recycling Coalition and Recycling Market Center websites. Thank you again for joining us. We hope you will join us for next month's webinar. Please visit the NRC and RMC websites for scheduled updates.